Hello and welcome back to this week's Burst Review live stream. We're trying something out a little different here than I normally do. So today, I wanted to talk about why I thought we are losing the culture war in general. Now, if any of you guys have even what would be considered moderately conservative views, or even if we're being honest, 20 years ago, what would be considered a liberal or libertarian view, then you know that anybody who basically believes in a quote unquote higher being and or believes that actions have consequences and that meritocracy is both good and fair, and you know that we are very much in the minority, or at least that is what is presented to us via the media, gun culture as well. But I believe strongly, the reason we're having so many issues in general right now with the culture war, etc., etc., is because we as Americans are not prepared to fight with our gloves off, you know? And our enemies are 100% prepared to do whatever whatever they want. And there is no such thing as too far, too ridiculous, too Machiavellian for those that oppose firearms and oppose personal liberty. And this is not even a race thing at all. It's 100% the concept of personal responsibility, of American individualism and exceptionalism, as well as the the ability to charter your own destiny. And 100% those that wish to seek your guns are only doing so for one of two reasons. They either they believe that they represent a a dire threat to their power, or they're going to do something that would otherwise get them shot, or maybe both. And in in my experience thus far, especially with the way that the Biden administration, whether or not you believe it to be valid or not, at this point doesn't matter, but regardless, those in power currently are holding nothing back. They're going full on insanity, and I would not be surprised if within a decade we were full blown communism under the thinly veiled disguise of democratic socialism. And the way things are headed right now, it doesn't look good. I mean, the fact that the election looked so fraudulent, right? And members of the Supreme Court that were selected by Trump, that were ostensibly staunch Republicans, staunch conservatives, failed to act in any way, shape, or form to preserve the liberty or even to take a closer look at those elections is frankly terrifying. And it's terrifying for a number of reasons, but especially because it shows that provided that the beer is cold and the football games are still playing, Americans don't care and they're not willing to, rock the boat, so to speak. And our ancestors weep for our inactivity. They absolutely must be. I mean, I'm sure if you could hook up wires to all of our grandparents, the amount of spinning in their grave would power the Northeast for years. It is. I weep for my child's future if we hold our current course, truly, because it is so insane what we're witnessing, the deification of criminals and the vilification of individuals who are ostensibly doing the right thing, or hell, even a culture where saying a particular word can get your entire career, life, etc., completely ruined in the blink of an eye, and that individuals that oppose us believe that saying these specific words, and you know what I mean, racial epithets, or even what's considered fine now will be a terrible faux pas in the future, will get your entire life ruined irreparably, and you'll be seen as a pariah slash social outcast, basically for eternity. And these individuals believe that words equal actions, uh, acta what's it called, verba is acta, whatever, and thus can justify committing real acts of violence because words hurt their feelings. And I 100% blame it on our current generation, but obviously more so on those that came before us who failed to act. It is absolutely nuts that what we're seeing in these last few months, and it should frankly scare the ever living hell out of everybody here. If you, even if you fancy yourself a moderate, and truly, there can be no weaker, short-sighted, or stupider position than a moderate in all of history, because there are extremes for which being a moderate on both sides still makes you an abhorrent individual. For example, there are those right now who want to add P to the LGBTQ, whatever the hell it is at this point, and P being pedophilia. And a moderate would say, well, maybe they can only touch kids some of the times. If that doesn't make you just, if that doesn't hurt your brain to hear and wonder where the hell we went wrong, I don't know what will. It is absolutely, absolutely nuts. And yes, we have a glimmer of hope coming from Arizona, but it's not something that I would rely on. And for those of you not familiar, Arizona recently uh, commissioned their own audit of the election and found massive fraud to literally nobody's surprise. And excuse me, and at this point, it could be upwards of 200,000 fraudulent votes. In an ideal world, upon such a revelation, even those who voted against Trump would want to see the elections be done fairly and justly. But as I said, those who oppose any sort of conservatism, any sort of righteous behavior, find nothing wrong with doing whatever it takes to win, regardless of the moral consequences. And as much as I want to say it's a two-edged sword, and if you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword, I don't think that's true. I think the cowardice of an ineptitude, or sorry, inactivity, and the sloth of Americans in general is damning us, because the left is running away right now, more or less, with no consequences. For example, you can do something that in any other time and place in history would be completely justified and be labeled as basically the worst of the worst. So in Columbia, South Carolina, recently an individual confronted a man who had been uh, roaming around the neighborhood where he didn't live and had been harassing various women. At one point, he tried to take a woman's baby three separate times before she said, "This is my baby, don't touch my baby," and ran away with it. And I believe he was a Marine. He could have been an Army guy. I don't recall, a soldier, but confronted the individual outside of his own property and told him to basically pound sand. But because the individual that was lurking around and being suspicious was a black kid, then all of a sudden this must be a race issue. And so somehow, spontaneously, a BLM flash mob showed up at the guy's house, threw bricks through his windows. They were threatening his wife and child, and it makes you sick. Like, I mean, come on. There's no way. Now, I don't even blame the individuals doing it. They're literally the definition of useful idiot. Those that are pulling the strings know damn well what they're doing, and they don't care. But I will say this: when playing with their little golems to undermine and destroy the stability of the republic in general, they fail to remember that in the old tale of the golem and whatnot, is that it turns on its master eventually, and it will. This BLM is an out of control beast, and eventually it will turn on its Marxist handlers and consume them. At least if there's any justice in this universe. It's absolutely despicable and infuriating. And then we've got the most recent example. I forget the individual's name. Let's see. Tariq Nasheed the race baiting lowest of the low scumbag who makes his living basically harassing innocent people. This time pointed out some video of some little tiny weak-looking white kid who had a meltdown while being scalded by a black customer. I think he was a night clerk at a Holiday Inn Express or some such. But what Tariq conveniently fails to include is that the poor kid is schizophrenic, he has schizoid tendencies, and he's also openly gay. And the customer called him a derogatory term for homosexual to his face directly beforehand for something that wasn't the kid's fault, and then proceeded to berate him until he had a meltdown. And I don't care who you are. You don't pick on the meek. You don't pick on the little tiny, that's like in like middle school or high school, finding the kid that had scoliosis and had like a back brace and pushing him over and laughing at him, or tipping somebody over in a wheelchair. Like I don't care how just you think you are. Like, genuinely, those sort of individuals deserve the electric chair. Best case scenario. A quick and painless death is too good for them. Picking on the disabled is probably the worst thing, save for going into a nursery and bashing in the brains of infants with a hammer. It is disgusting beyond description, and drives me absolutely freaking nuts. I just it's something I've been wanting to address for a while. I had about a year ago written like a rough script of what I was calling the war on words, and it was going to lead into this. And basically, the premise was I was going to discuss how the left and the right, to an extent, will manipulate verbiage, manipulate diction, words, etc., in order to wedge a unwinnable position upon their opponents. So, great example. Uh, if you are pro-abortion, then you say that you're pro-choice, because who could be against giving someone the choice to do something? Or if you're anti-abortion, you say that you're pro-life, and that's who could be against life, right? Similarly, the left did this to shoehorn and ram gay marriage down the throats of millions of Americans who frankly didn't want it, by calling it marriage equality. Because I mean, equality is that's what America's all about. But the reality of it is, and I can't speak too much on it, or I will get 100% perma banned. But there was no reason whatsoever that I could even fathom when I was living in the Northeast in Massachusetts, that they couldn't afford homosexuals of whatever variety they want to be the same rights as marriage without calling it marriage. I mean, that would be an actual middle of the road solution, but it had to be marriage. And the problem is, marriage is a specific term applying to a man and a woman, but to no avail, the courts went with it. But I mean, I wasn't surprised living in Massachusetts, because the People's Republic might as well be in the freaking Kremlin. Let me read what some of the comments are saying so far. I'm seeing some individuals already trying to bait me into saying something. Someone named Art and Finance is clearly trying to bait me into something here. Let's see. Yes, it is a race thing. Poor conservatives lost the culture war during Reconstruction when they turned on black people and became white. Okay. I don't think white people in general ever sort of declared themselves white. I believe that was a narrative pushed by others. And to be completely honest, uh, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I guess I consider myself white, but if you ask me what am I, I'd be, German and Irish. And if anything, to meet the real definition of white, I'd have to be a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and I'm not. So I guess by a actual definition, though, any sort of true definition, meaning a Webster's or original dictionary definition, or like a legal definition, no longer holds any meaning, because provided that you don't meet the narrative of the powers that be, you can be labeled whatever you'd want to be. For a good example, George Zimmerman, although he made some very poor decisions, was not a white individual. He was Hispanic, but he was white Hispanic because it fit the narrative better of the Trayvon Martin shooting being a race issue, as opposed to the an issue of a guy trying to make a difference in his community, but then doing it in a very sloppy, stupid way and pursuing individuals on property that wasn't his. I think nobody was a quote unquote good guy in that scenario, and I definitely think he could have gone about it better. But given that he was literally being bludgeoned to death, he acted legally, and I would even argue he acted, at least in those moments, he acted ethically, because I would say it would be a core human right to preserve your own life. I don't think that anybody at any point should just throw their arms up and let themselves be trampled to death, and I don't think anybody should ever be compelled otherwise, legally or socially or whatever. Um, let's see. Let's Real democracy means AK-47s for everybody. I don't want democracy. I truly don't. But I certainly don't want a republic any longer. I don't think that. I think it's a failed experiment because we've allowed too many individuals with conflicting interests to have entirely too much power over the government in general. I don't think that's even a point of contention. I think it would go a long, long way to solve the issues in America were we to restrict individuals in government from having any sort of dual citizenship. And I will be lambasted as anti-Semitic for saying so, or this, that, and the other. But if I believe you should have 100% skin in the game if you're in the quote-unquote ruling class. Uh, Jake White said a court deciding election scares people in power. It absolutely does. Though not as much anymore because I think they understand that they've got those courts well inside their pockets, or at least they've got some means of exerting influence and or control over them. ZZ Staff says liberals make school books, own all of the media that most people watch, lie repeatedly. Now they have all the power in D.C., where 51 Senate votes win the Supreme Court justices in their sights. Yeah, it's when Trump was in power, he should have acted like the tyrant that the left labeled him as. As much as I do not want to see a truly tyrannical leader on either side, that may have been our last chance to preserve the republic without bloodshed. The troll also posted, "How long do you think God would bless a country rooted in genocide? God didn't give you this land, and when you got it, you were sloppy." I think you just described literally every civilization ever to inhabit this earth. Literally every single one. For however many caveman tribes or whatever groups on whatever continent or whatever were alive at one point, they killed another group to gain their lands and or assimilated and or raped and pillaged, and it's a never-ending cycle of violence because that is human nature. Unfortunately, there is no way to sing Kumbaya with your hostile neighbors and then you all hang out, but also allow the other one to maintain their existing culture, ideas, deities, whatever, and let them live harmoniously and parallel to you. Unfortunately, the reality is one group is stronger than the other and then wipes that second group out. And then the first group then persists. Uh, Dolphin Cruz says we're chasing away black people while Democrats are importing more votes. We need more people. I think the problem, Dolphin, is Trump made a very real effort to garner the black vote, and truth be told, he's probably done more for black Americans than any Democrat has done in the last 50 years. I would say that individuals like LBJ have doomed them to mediocrity and being dependent on the government teat for the foreseeable future. And although it may seem in the short term like a great thing to, for example, welfare and whatnot, the reality is the excesses of it and the way that it's set up are not designed to encourage individuals to get back into the workforce, much like our current predicament with the stimulus checks and whatnot, but rather it encourages individuals to simply stay at home and not work, and they still have a livable wage. Kind of like the UBI, except this one was not done with any sort of vote. It was just kind of forced. There are no R's, moderates, or D's anymore. It's collectivist, statists, liberty-minded individuals, or eaters. I'll agree with that, unfortunately. Johnny Pop Tart says, I think we're losing the culture war because we're importing new cultures. I agree. We are no longer the quote unquote mixing bowl that America was envisioned in the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. But now I've even heard growing up from well, my wife's about a few years younger than me, and she came from a different generation, and that she was telling me that her history books or whatever were telling the students that America is more of like a salad bowl where you're all together but separate. And I was like, yeah, that's not really realistic. Let's see. At Trump Chicken, reparations aren't due to anybody living. I'll agree with that. And the thing is, there's no way to justly do reparations at this point. It would be one thing if it was like Japanese internment, right? There's a handful of individuals for a very set amount of time were incarcerated or in Black Americans cases enslaved, uh, and then very soon thereafter were given reparations. At this point, everybody to some degree is both responsible and a victim of it, to the point where there's no just way to do it. It would literally just be a handout Democrats use to pander black votes for the next however many 100 years. And knowing the Democratic playbook, reparations would not be a one-time payment. It would literally be a stipend you get for the rest of your life. And conceivably, for anybody of any sort of African descent, for the rest of their existence and their children's existence. Greg says they don't care if you're autistic or special, only if you'll let them puppeteer you and then throw you out. 100% true. Uh, I wonder if that kid behind the desk, because I'm sure he was a card-carrying member of the NAACP, since he was a pretty hardcore leftist based on what I've seen about his Reddit profile or whatever. I wonder if he got a first-hand example or taste of the fact that just because individuals are allied with you overall does not mean they actually give any about you whatsoever. And I think that especially uh, that specific group he belongs to has never been terribly popular with the African American voters at all. A great example would be why Buttigieg was literally unelectable. Although clearly it didn't matter because he stole the election. Ricky says, grown ass man placed himself in the situation by trying to play cop and proceeded to get his ass beat like a drum by a young teenager. He did something stupid and he got jumped. Again, shouldn't have been there. But at that point, once Trayvon was beating the man semi unconscious, he has to act. And I can't blame him for doing so, because if I were in that situation, though I would never put myself in the situation, if I were then forced into that instance, I would do exactly the same thing, though I probably would have shot him more times just because of training. Uh, Senator Lindsey Graham explained this recently. The poor conservatives turned on black people, and you know it. I don't know about that. I'm fairly certain that I live in South Carolina right now, and I have never, never in my life met any individual of even moderate education that was openly racist or went out of their ways to ever do anything unfair to anybody of any sort of color whatsoever. And I've lived in West Virginia, and I have never seen a giant, open, rampant, ardent racist in my entire life. I'm sure they exist, but they are not the greatest threat to American democracy that Biden makes them out to be. Much in the same way that I'm not concerned about uh, the Amish overrunning me at any given time, because they're a statistic, uh, minute possibility. serious question. At what point do you say enough is enough? I think it varies for every American. I think what we're going to see is that eventually these individuals in power will do something so egregious that Americans as a whole, nobody will find it to be palpable, except for those that literally eat, drink, and sleep the party line. And even at that point, I can't imagine that they may have to suffer through the cognitive dissonance of understanding that something is fundamentally wrong, even if it goes with the party. Let's see. So it's just cool to invade people's land. That's just human nature. That's very Christian. Well, Trump chicken, I would 100% challenge you to but probably realistically, you're not a practicing Christian. I mean, if you are, good for you, I guess. But I wouldn't try to apply your or my beliefs to me that you don't adhere to, as that's not really a fair stance. But I will humor you this: uh, not every human being in all of history, Christian or otherwise, was a good Christian. And truth be told, the whole concept of Christianity is forgiveness. It is understanding that man, woman, whatever, is fundamentally flawed and the original sin is a real thing. And that we are all sinners, but through the grace of Christ, we are given forgiveness if we truly, truly repent. And that's a huge, huge fundamental pillar of Christianity. Uh, it may rub you the wrong way to think that, well, these guys act like holier than thou individuals, but then they never practice what they preach. But I would say at the threat of being called out for whataboutism or whatever, that there are individuals of a much larger religious group that are far more violent, but always are considered peaceful. And I don't think that's really fair. Uh, Trump says, "Who cares if it's not perfect? We need votes. That's why we're losing." Well, agreed, but I don't think it matters at this point. I think the system is so rigged that no amount of votes could sway. I mean, people trying to argue that Biden got more votes than Obama is absolutely foolish at the very, very best. It is it is literally inconceivable that an individual so milk toast as Joe Biden could pull the amount of numbers he allegedly did. It's just there's just no way. I mean, especially if you look at the bellwether counties or states or whatever, and how they're right. Usually about 70 or 80% of them are correct, and only two of them were predicted Biden would be president of the United States. I mean, that's the most minute one. But the fact that if you look at every single Biden rally, there were ghost towns, and every single Trump rally had people in the rafters. It's There's no way. There's just no way. Let's see. Makes no difference how many votes we have when they just create new ones. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think until Republicans are prepared to do whatever it takes, we will literally never see another conservative in a contentious election ever again. I think we will see that the tide will slowly but eventually rise and consume the rest of the country with perhaps not true Democrats, but more moderate or left-leaning Republicans, and then eventually full-blown Democrats, probably within a generation. Nobody's calling you racist. History so history. You benefited from it and you refuse to right the wrongs. I've never done anything, and I don't even think that's even accurate. I mean, you could argue the Civil War was reparations. The amount of bloodshed in that conflict, that's your reparations. However many countless Americans died, that was payment. Sorry if you don't like the currency. That's all I got. George Zimmerman, totally self-defense. Agreed. Hornet says, oh wow. Let's see. whatever happened to separation of church and state? Why are you mixing religion, Christianity with politics? I would argue that to an extent, the separation of church and state was a mistake because those on the left have turned state into a religion, and so the lines between the two are completely blurred. David Holmes says the demand for unironically racist people is much larger than the actual supply. I would say that. Uh, if you were to believe the media narrative, you would think that everywhere, south of Dixie, there's Klan members on every corner with, with lighters and crosses soaked in kerosene, ready to go. I'm Muslim, and I have many Christian friends, and they are good people. There are good Muslims, and there are good Christians. There are good Hindus. There are good pretty much everything. Uh, I guess again, we need to return to personal responsibility. And plus, for those of you stating that you benefited from whatever sins of the past, a core tenet of Christianity, as well as what we consider to be a solid and healthy culture and society, would be the sins of the father are not on the children. Uh, if I am a complete scumbag, dirtbag, and I fleece people and I say I murder someone or whatever, my son did nothing to deserve your ire, and he should never be held responsible for it. And it would be very really difficult to argue otherwise, at least with any sort of intellectual honesty. Let's see. Grimes says separation of church, meaning sect and state, but not God and state. We are a Christian nation, or at least we should be. I'll agree with that. A sort of perfect world. I'll also say that the core tenets of morality in terms of the West stem from Christianity, and some would argue stem from a Judeo-Christian perspective and ethics. And to be honest, I've never read the Torah, so I couldn't speak on that part. But I will say that in general, without some sort of and I don't want to say deity because I don't think that's right. I think without God in your life, without some sort of reason to persist and some reason to leave the earth better than you found it, then what's the point? What are we bothering for? And the pragmatic atheist would say, well, I'm just, or pseudo atheist would say something along the lines of, well, I believe in God because if I'm wrong, oh well, and if I'm right, I go to heaven. And I was like, well, I don't think it really works like that. But again, I've never met God, couldn't tell you. Uh, Wait a minute, you're conflating rally sizes with both. What are the silent majorities? Is that a thing? Come on, man. Why are you doing this to yourself? Uh, the silent majority absolutely was a thing, as we saw in 2016. That, or the fact that Democrats overplayed their hand and didn't realize they had to cheat to the extent they cheated. I honestly believe that with any sort of in-depth analysis, we'll find that not only did they cheat in this election, they have cheated in every election in the last 40 years, to the extent that I believe that the majority of the country is actually Republican. Although I would also argue that I believe you should have quote unquote skin in the game to be able to vote on the policies that affect Americans. And thus, I think you should own some sort of property. And I don't want to say land because that's not fair because land is a finite commodity. But I will say this: you should at least own a piece of property, whether that's a house or an apartment or whatever, something that is a tangible domicile to have the right to vote. And I absolutely do not believe that individuals who immigrate here from other countries, first generation, should have that right, regardless. And it's not a racist thing. It's more of I feel like you should have roots here before you have a say in how things are run. And I would make an exception for those that serve in the armed forces as sort of a waiver. But that makes me some sort of fascist, evil, racist, or whatever the hell people want to label me as. Grimes says Mormons and the Latter Day Saints, excuse me, are the same thing. Last I checked, they are great Christians. If they follow the tenets properly, they are. The problem is when you say Christians that adhere to the Bible properly, you can a lot of times they'll try to kind of shoehorn you into the no true Scotsman logical fallacy, which isn't really. I mean, it's kind of like how the whole slippery slope fallacy, a logical fallacy, is a logical fallacy until it's demonstrably not. Uh, when we stated that, when you allow for the the relaxing of voter ID laws, or you do not demand that individuals have a an ID to vote, then eventually it's going to lead to just, rampant widespread fraud, and of course it did and has been. Uh, let's see. Culture wars lost. Got to break up the USA. I think unfortunately you might be right. I will say absolutely that the the South separating from the North, or at least conservative states separating from liberal states, seems more and more plausible, provided that conservatives want to retain any sort of control or any sort of influence in their government in the foreseeable future. Well said, Sean. Sean wrote, "Separation of church and state doesn't mean you can't vote your religious interests. I'm an atheist, but I don't like the constant anti-Christian sentiment rather." And I think a big reason why there is so much anti-Christian sentiment is a combination of two factors. The first is Christians won't do anything about it. The whole turn the other cheek thing absolutely applies. There are very few Christians in America that, if you insult Christ, will enact violence upon you. Uh, that said, there was such a large pushback against quote unquote Bible thumpers in the late 80s, the 90s, and 2000s, especially during the Bush years, the second Bush, that there are still people out there, and I know a few of them, that staunchly believe that it's these quote unquote Bible thumping Republicans that are in charge of the United States still, and they're the ones holding back our liberty and our freedom, etc., etc. But the truth couldn't be further. Dugan says, break the USA down further, not just to the state level. I can see it. Grimes follows up with, if we break up the USA, then the liberals get California. They ruin it, they can keep it. Agreed. Although I'd like some of my friends in California to leave first, but can't make an omelet without breaking some few eggs. Let's see. Rick Grimes, okay, but that's all they get. They buy out anyone else who wants to leave. My skin in the game is my taxes. I'll agree with that. That's fair. Uh, and admittedly, there are not a great deal of individuals out there that pay taxes that are in this country. We'll call it extrajudiciarily, so illegally. It's beyond frustrating. Uh, I was planning on doing for this this whole thing, kind of playing something in the background, like some sort of game while chatting with you guys, and it's just I don't know. It's the more that I look at the state of affairs in the U.S. and the way that it's heading, it's just, I mean, it's hard not to be a fatalist at this point. Uh, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it absolutely does not bode well. Recon Plane says Christianity is a joke as a tolerant religion stands for nothing. I think the current form of many denominations of Christianity are precisely that. I think Catholicism, prior to populist woke popes, and our current one is not the first one, uh, was the last vestige of a I don't want to say a fundamentalist Christian approach to Christianity, but something similar to that. Uh, Odysseus says system anti-white, system anti-white. No more self-defensive aggressors, non-white, especially black. Yeah, unfortunately, it seems that regardless of how you'll be found in court, the court of popular or public opinion is going to absolutely lambaste you and assume your guilt, even if proven innocent, and your life will pretty much be over. I mean, probably save for if you have the guy on film executing people, but there's still some pretty hardcore supporters that would still call you evil, etc., etc. Not reading that comment. But yeah, no, it's I don't know. I've it's and I feel like I'm obviously preaching to the chorus, and I know that. But at the same time, I feel like we need to come up with some method to affect change that does not involve bloodshed because our options are definitely running out here pretty soon. So, on a lighter note, I did want to discuss a few other things real quick. Uh, for South Carolinians out there, it looks like constitutional carry is going to be a thing in the very near future. Awesome, very cool. I already have my carry license here in South Carolina, but it's nice to know that it will no longer be required. I think the only benefit now of having your carry license is that you can skip the NICS check basically. Uh, wow, you guys are roasting it up right now. The the other thing I wanted to discuss, which I thought was interesting. Give me one second to pull up my notes. I know we had some good news coming out of Arizona where they passed some law preventing frivolous lawsuits against gun manufacturers, which is always good. Uh, oh, that's right. The FPC was just permitted by a judge to push forward with a with legislation, or rather with a suit against the California handgun roster. I mean, obviously California is unfortunately lost to the wolves, but anytime they can get even an inch back, more power to them. And interesting, which is always a good thing, obviously. And then there's another thing I wanted to mention, and I'm trying to recall what it was. I had it on a separate page in my notes. Um, I know that the one piece of good news is ammunition is starting to come back in stock in places, although it is definitely still priced in the stratosphere, which is unfortunate, but also understandable. Um, I know in terms of gear and whatnot, a couple of cool things came out, but nothing absolutely mind blowing. I know they came out. We saw a couple of what was it? Holosun came out with some new optics, and but nothing's coming out recently that's really been kind of mind blowing. But I believe a huge portion of that is these companies are just trying to keep up with existing orders, which again, understandable. Let's see what the comments. Have you messed around with a 3D printer yet? I have not. I would like to because I actually have a decent amount of experience with 3D modeling and using CAD. I went to school for video game design, which is foolish, and I recommend against it. But I was fortunate enough to get in and out of the program before it became a woke nightmare. Uh, I was I acted as a TA for a couple of students, and I was very harsh to literally all of them. But I was never vicious. I was just very matter of factual, and I didn't powder coat stuff, sugar coat stuff like a lot of folks would, where they'd be like, "Well, your idea is good, but maybe this." I mean, no, this is terrible. Do this, do that. No, people are 100% laughing behind your back if you do something stupid like that. Don't do that. Now I'm sure people are gonna, call it bullying or whatnot, but in my experience, a good friend is an individual that will tell you hard truths when you need to hear them, and I'm sure that makes me evil or whatever nowadays. But I would much rather have somebody before I walk out of the door say, "Hey man, you look like a moron. Change your outfit," than to be like, "Yeah, you look great." You know, what do I know? Oh man, people are going into it. So, in the meantime, I don't know. What do you guys want to talk about? I know that the unfortunately the we're having some buffering issues. I did increase my upload speed, but that said, I did not increase it substantially enough to completely prevent any sort of buffering whatsoever, which is unfortunate, but is what it is. Let's see. Odysseus says conservatives and Republicans are a joke, no teeth. Will never do anything. They are liberals going the speed limit. Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right, and I wish that you weren't, but it's seeming more and more to be the case that realistically we are not going to see Republicans really hit back. I mean, hell, the fact that Trump's saying mean words to individuals and literally just saying wrong crap like that was seen as so radical is depressing. If if all he had to do was deliver on campaign promises, and he would have been a solid moderate, if we're being completely honest. A real conservative would have, septupled ISIS funding and threw everybody out of the country that wasn't here legally. But that will. I mean, that can of worms is beyond open. And it's Pandora's box. We can never get it closed, not without some sort of absolutely horrific tyrannical action at this point. Is BR still mad at me? I'm not mad at you for anything, brother. I'm just there's a fair amount of comments and everything is extremely delayed, so I apologize if it seems like I'm just brushing you guys off. I think the I think we're currently delayed by like a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes, which is not great. But the last stream, I think at the end was 18 minutes delayed, which was that was rough. Other than that, I have been building some ARs recently, which I've not done in a long time, and I forget when I haven't done them for a long time, right? One of the things I always screw up is the positioning of the spring on the hammer, not the trigger, always the hammer. Like it, I don't mess it up for like a while. It's like I look at it, I put it in backwards, and I go, nope, that's wrong. And let's see, the most recent one, and I'm doing this for an Ammo Land review. This would be, let's see, I don't know how well it's going to show on camera. Let me see if I can pull up the, there we go. It is, other way, there we go. It's not a law tactical folder, but a new-ish company called, if I can remember it, I believe it's L7. I want to say, I think it's L7. But it has a law tactical folder. There you go. Like built into it. You can see the latch right there. So if I can actually get really close to the camera, there we go. You can see the latch is right about there. We go. So this guy engages, and then what you can't really tell until I point it at you would be the buffer tube, or the buffer itself has a small extension so that it actually still can interface with the bolt carrier group, so that you can and then rock and roll. I haven't shot the yeah, we're clear. I haven't shot the gun with the brace folded. I'm told it's a big no-no. I'm kind of morbidly curious to see what would happen. This is a pistol configuration, pistol, and yeah, I think it's a 10-inch barrel, 300 blackout with my Saker 7.62 ASR that I bought from Silencer Shop. I like it a lot. The receiver was like 99% good, and I'm gonna go way more in depth when I actually do the review for it rather. The only issue I had with it was the detent hole for the selector switch was out of spec. It was slightly too small, and so when I first installed the selector switch, I'm trying to make sure this guy doesn't just fall over on the ground. Yeah, there we go. When I first installed the selector switch, I had an issue of there was like no tension to the selector, but not long thereafter, it seemed to be working fine. When I took a Dremel tool, actually I took a Dremel bit and I found a drill bit that was approximately the same diameter as the pin, and just kind of reamed it out a little bit, and then used a fine jeweler's polish, take the rough edges off. Runs fine now. Let's see. I think you just need to be paying taxes as Grimes, but yes, exception for military and service personnel. Thank you. The newest Magpul BSL is pretty decent. Have you had a chance to try one out yet? No, they were sending AmmoLand 1, and I sent it to one of our writers. I don't remember which guy yet to do a review on. Uh, Simply, I just don't have the bandwidth for it right now, unfortunately. Uh, I'm streaming LTE, T-Mobile, East Coast, and not too bad. Yeah, my problem, Frank, is that I'm in the middle of like bumfuckistan. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and so I have a wireless bridge going to my main house to get to the office here, and as a result, I'm getting a pretty decent speed degradation. Not huge, but I think my upload speed in the main building is like 16 up, which is fine. But out here, it's only like 4 or 5 up, which is pretty atrocious. Do I have an OnlyFans? And no, but I'll make one for you so you can buy my bathwater. Absolutely, it'll be a mixture of Cosmoline, hops, and tears. Neo-Leninists are the real transphobes. I know what you're getting at, and yes, you're not wrong. We're seeing the I guess what is considered centrist sliding more and more to the left every day, till eventually, uh, believing something that is atrociously, absurdly left wing today will be considered a right wing position in 50 years. Yeah, it's gonna happen. Donnie is an asshole, but did make him a bad guy. We're talking about the Big Lebowski. Freaking Donnie, man. Am I the only one who gives a shit about the rules? But yeah, no, that's basically what I've been doing. That and raising a child, which has been is not only a solid financial investment, but totally not an exercise in futility and destruction of my sleep patterns at all. Nope, not at all. Although truth be told, my wife has been an absolute champion when taking care of the kid. She's been amazing. When he wakes up in the middle of the night, he's upset. She like rushes over there immediately, and rarely does she make me have to rock him back to sleep. Maybe at the most like twice a week. She's an absolute rock star and amazing. And yeah, no, it really was 18 minutes delayed. So whatever you typed your first message, that's where I'm at now. So I think that might have been 6 minutes ago. So yeah, I'm pretty delayed right now apparently. Oh yeah, because I can just now see in the stream myself handling the gun. Yeah, they want to shut. Yeah, I know. Frank is 100% right. These guys are absolutely trying to bait me into saying something stupid to get myself deplatformed or whatever the hell. And I'm not dumb enough. Just barely, but not dumb enough. Uh, it's. I mean, that's the thing with that guy in Colombia who had that kid, lurking around, and he assaulted him by shoving him with one hand. Uh, the first thing I would have done is taken 2 steps back before just doing anything to the kid. Make sure you're on your property, and then find out whoever's filming you and be like, "Hey, I want your name and address." And if they're like, "Why?" You'd be like, "Well, in South Carolina, it's illegal to film somebody on their property without their consent, and you do not have my consent. So I'm going to sue the ever living crap out of you." Not that it would do anything because we both know, or like we all know, that the courts are so lopsided against you as a white American that it's not even funny, especially in that circumstance. And even if you're 100% in the right, they will never find or never rule in your favor purely because they themselves are too cowardly to take the heat of doing the right thing. They're failing to remember the old adage that what is right is not always popular, and what is popular is not always right. Oh, they nuked your stream for in 2 weeks ago for less than this. That's rough, dude. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. All right, so I'm gonna right at this very moment for me it is 10:29. So we'll see uh what time you guys actually hear this. So when you hear me say this part 10:29, comment in the comment section. I'm curious how bad it is. I'm having a guy come out and take a look at the connection, but it's actually better now. But anyway, I will show you guys what I have been playing recently. I will resume my campaign. This is Red Earth, Black Powder, or Black Powder Red Earth. I always say it backwards, but isometric, turn-based strategy games. This is what I when I'm in the middle of writing, I need a break. This is what I tend to play. And you're gonna watch me absolutely get smoke checked by some bad guys here because that's kind of how it goes. Let's see. I do wish that I thought this thing. Oh yeah, so Frank is saying I'm 15 minutes behind right now. So yeah, I believe it. But yeah, and I'm sure it has to do with the connectivity here. And I may end up eventually just going back to my main office to do these streams in the future. Because I would like to eventually do some streams for AmmoLand. Uh, the problem is we have other guys on the team that are infinitely better and more well versed on politics and especially like anything that has to do with legislature whatsoever than I could even hope to be. I mean, they've probably realistically forgotten more than I know. And so I would struggle to be able to keep up with them, and I wouldn't want to make the company look bad because of my own ineptitude. And it's a novel approach, right? But how about so what have you guys been looking into in terms of new guns and whatnot? Because for me, I haven't seen a lot of anything really like revolutionary, so to speak. Purely because there's like I said, I think most companies are just focusing on meeting current demand. I know I've heard some companies, and I'm not at liberty to say which, are not only are they a year behind, so to speak, they are they are a year behind in terms of not just production or whatever, but they are a year behind in orders and production. So like it's like they've got to, they've not only do they have to they've taken more orders than they can actually fill in 1 year. So it should be interesting. Let's see. Sorry, I'm reading back the comments. How many kids do I plan on having? So I'm just now getting this message. I'm hoping to have at least two. I would like to have three or four. I don't know if my sanity can take it. I'm not as young as I used to be, and I will say this: having kids in general is 100% a young man's game. So testing 1033. So am I 4 minutes behind? That's not terrible. You know, Johnny, I think Cosmoline might not be terrible if applied sparingly. I think it's going to act a lot like grease, but it's very thick. I do know, though, from experience, like if you shoot a firearm and it has Cosmoline on it, and once you get the gun warm, the Cosmoline tends to go away. So I would be, I would kind of think that like actual grease, when it warms up, it goes where it needs to go. Hey, Tango down. Let's go. We're losing the culture war because the left puts us in a bubble and they only want to attribute the Second Amendment to hunting and plinking. When every year we have 250,000 to 300, or sorry, to 3 million defensive uses of firearm. I know. There is, in no, in no way did the founding fathers intend for the Second Amendment to only apply to hunting. There's just, and plinking. That was, that was never the case. And I think it's intellectually dishonest of people to suggest otherwise at best. And then realistically, I think a lot of these individuals are just frankly just stupid and don't know. But I think an equal amount of, especially constitutional scholars, so to speak, they know better. They just don't care. They will manipulate the narrative to fit their worldview. Whether or not it happens to be true is unimportant. 7 wow, 7 minutes delay. That's pretty substantial. Yikes. Let's say, yeah, don't say something to get to platform. Don't even use my stronger language. I know. It's it's frustrating, and it's definitely interesting that individuals try to, they bait you into stuff, and I get it. I understand it. They have no other means of actually affecting anything, and they are these little, impotent, and I mean that in the literal phrase, not in oh, I lacked sexual prowess, but in the sense that they literally cannot affect things. It is their only way. I mean, and the amount of individual, the whole what's empowering, so to speak, the Twitter mob is mind blowing, because like literally, why would you ever do this thing? Especially when it comes to like companies who do it to placate, hyper minority groups at the cost of alienating their core fan base. It makes zero sense unless you're just virtue signaling, which is exactly what they're all doing. Just got through bending my MP5 flat. Do you know of any good places to find parts other than H&K parts? Yes. RobertRTG.com is excellent. And there's one other one. Oh wow, they have an AT3 stagger trainer. That's pretty badass. Um, there's another company, and I'm drawing a blank. It's something wood supply. MP5. Let's see. It's Gatewood. Is that what it might be? Gatewood. Yeah, Gatewood Supply Co. Also has MP5 parts for reasonable prices on occasion. Reasonable for an MP5. But they've got some pretty cool stuff there a lot of times. For a while, they had some damaged but otherwise functional Surefire handguards with the integral flashlight for the MP5 for like 200 something dollars, which is not bad at all. Ufala Tactics. slash XCOM. Yeah, so Jagged Alliance 2 is actually one of my old school like favorite games. I freaking love JA2. I've beat that game probably a dozen times. Both with and without all the mods and everything else, and it sucks that every company that tries to kind of replicate the magic of that game always fails. They always end up with some like perversion of it that just isn't good. Cry Precision 612. Yeah, good luck. I like old guns too there myself. I'm a pretty big fan of some of the older stuff. I mean that C96 in the thumbnail is mine. I really like that gun quite a bit. And I mean, I don't like that it's chambered in 30 Mauser, but I can live. I can live with it for the price that I paid for it. And of course, immediately after I bought it, that same gun shop got in. It was even rougher condition one. A red 9 for like $400. But it was. I mean, when I say rough condition, it was beat. Like I wasn't sure it was even like safe to fire. Caltech P50. Yeah. Farco, my one of our guys that does work for us on occasion, Oleg. He seemed to like the gun a lot. I think it's from the perspective of like it's very cool for sure. I don't know if it's going to be something I would rely on necessarily, but in terms of anything that is chambered in 5.7, but and actually uses a P90 mag, hell yeah, that's cool as hell. Datslov says, I really want to get into 3D printing world, but I can't find someone to learn how under. I'm not quite as smart as I seem to be at times. Dude, I 100% get it. Especially with a kid, I feel like I have no time to do anything anymore. And like learning a new skill set means putting off other responsibilities that I just don't have the time to do it at the moment. And I think that is another reason why when I find times to play video games for fun or whatever, I don't tend to play anything that's really new. I mean, to some extent, but usually anything I play is based on a genre that I'm intimately familiar with because it sounds kind of stupid, but I don't want to play something that I have to learn how to play that's dramatically different unless it's like something that I've kind of always wished existed, but other than that, I'm for the most part just gonna stick with what I know. Because when I'm playing games, I'm playing games to have fun and relax, and I don't want to have to go and like struggle to figure out what the hell's going on. That's why I mean even this game is not difficult, right? But like pillow fights, moving intent towards targets, thought it would take up 3 action points each. Yeesh. That means it is pretty much 100% time to go hot. We'll see. Perhaps my game is lagging up my stream. I don't think so. It doesn't seem to matter because the amount of data that I'm putting out regardless seems to be exactly the same. Uh, if anything, it's an 8-bit game. Although I know that the the capture of said game is not done in 8 bits. It's done at whatever the resolution of my monitor is, which is like, well, I have it set to 1080p right now, but it's a 2K monitor. I was just not even going to attempt to stream at 2K on this setup. It just would never work. Shit. There we go. Target down. Oh, I see what you're saying there, Borak. No, I actually wasn't referring to Arsenal, but I'm sure that's the case too. Actually, no. With Arsenal, I would say it's probably not the case because Arsenal tends to stockpile stuff and then sit on it until the market is basically to the point where they know they can just like fleece people. Glad to hear it, FNH. Hope you drove safe, my man. Yeah, I've heard good things about the HK5 as well. I bet, to be completely honest, the Century AP5 is probably a fine gun based on who makes it. Uh, but that said, the issue is that $3,000 for a non H&K literally makes no sense. Because let's say for whatever reason you decide you want to sell that gun, there's no way in hell you're getting back what you paid for it. There's just zero chance. Because I don't know anybody who would. I mean, and I'm not saying you should look at every gun as an investment. That doesn't really make sense. But I will say that for the majority of individuals, they're not. You expect to at least in a pinch be able to sell your gun, for enough that it doesn't feel like you're being, like I said, like just fleeced or whatever. The only platform worse than Twitter is Reddit. Yeah, Reddit's awful. And I think Reddit had a lot of potential to not be awful, and then it got horrible because it became a giant echo chamber, which came as a surprise to basically nobody. I think this game is about to pop off into a Mogadishu mile setup here pretty soon. What's interesting in this game is that there is no such thing as a friendly or a non-hostile. Every unit you come across, civilian or unarmed or whatever, can become a hostile. What is one of the gun laws I wish nobody complied with? Ideally, everything under the NFA should be wholly thrown out, but realistically, it's not going to be. And I don't think any politician is prepared to be the guy that legalized machine guns or whatever. And so, I mean, same with why I think we are never going to realistically see the Hearing Protection Act get passed, is because no politician wants to be the guy that was the one to quote unquote legalize silencers, those assassin tools. So I don't think it'll ever pass ever. I mean, if it didn't pass with a Republican majority, it's not going to pass now. I think the only way they would be able to conceivably get something like that to pass now would be is if they use like an ADA sort of a lawsuit, basically, or an OSHA, sorry, lawsuit, basically stating that, precluding this means or banning these items basically